Your Mac guys, John McMullen and Jody McDonald hanging with you here on Birds 365 on a football Friday. No football being played, but plenty of it being talked here on Birds 365. And we appreciate Brian Cameron did a nice job jumping in for us first time from PhillySportsNetwork.com. His take on Jason Kelce was good, and it did surprise me when I heard an argument on the radio for, no, you should be rooting for Jason Kelce to step away. That makes no sense. But we do need to hear something in the next 3 days here, John. And Jason is a very media savvy guy, has his own podcast, does show up on WIP. We saw him on Saturday Night Live just last weekend. So he knows how to play the game with the best of them. Do you assume his own social media account sometime in the next 3 days? Because free agency starts Monday. That's when legalized tampering starts. And Howie Roseman would like to know ahead of time for Isaac Seumalo purposes, if your read is right, which you've been saying this for, months, as a matter of fact, Kelce will help determine how aggressive the Eagles are in trying to re-sign Isaac Seumalo. I agree with your assessment there. Isaac is a key guy. If they bring Isaac back, anybody who would complain about that, I think, would be stupid, unless Isaac gets some outrageous contract, which I don't think is going to happen. I don't think the Eagles will give it to him. I don't think anybody in the league will. I think he'll get good, solid left, right guard money, but nothing more than that. But they got to know whether they can spend that or not, because they got a whole bunch of other decisions they got to make. So how's Jason going to handle this over the next couple of days?
Well, I thought he was going to announce it on his podcast. Maybe they still do a special. I know they have a lot of stuff in the can. They were out at the combine. They were replaying interviews they did with Howie. I think Howie already knows. I mean, to be honest, I think he's let Howie in on the question. Now Roseman said out in Indy that he can take as much time as he wants. I think that affects the Eagles' planning. Maybe it's true. But if I were a betting man, I would bet that Howie already knows. And, it's just a matter of when the actual news comes out. And like I said, I thought he'd do it on his podcast for everything you just said, Jody. He's a savvy guy, understands. Why give it to the Inquirer or WIP? Do it yourself.
Right.
He's building a pretty significant brand with his brother. So ultimately, I thought it would come down in that route. But maybe he really is thinking about it. He just had a third daughter. All the Tom Brady stuff is starting again. Nobody believes he's retired. Now all the Miami talk is coming up again. He's talking about adopting kittens, and nobody believes it. So, there's a potential that he really is still mulling it over. But in the past, he's always been very cognizant of helping the team. That's why I talk about it the way I talk about it. And I don't think that's changing. Is he going to feel different in July when it's time to report to training camp than right now? Probably. But he probably doesn't want to put the Eagles in that situation as well.
Right. And the one thing that the players who have been in a position that Jason Kelce is in, he getting to determine when his football career ends. John, what would you say, 95%, 98% of the players don't get to decide that.
No.
The league decides that for them. They go, guess what? No teams are interested in bringing you in, even on a minimum deal or whatever. The sport decides when you're done playing the sport. About 2 or 3% of the players get a chance to actually dictate terms and go, now I'm done. Even though there are teams that are still interested in my services, I just want to get on with the rest of my life. So Jason's in a very advantageous and almost unique position of being able to dictate terms. You mentioned the timing of it come July. You're right. When you actually got to get back out there and do the work, and you've had the downtime, and you've had the rest, and you've been around your family, It's going back to work. And that's something that a lot of guys don't necessarily look forward to. But the one other thing I'll say about Jason Kelce is he just loves his teammates. He loves being an Eagle. He loves being at the facility. He loves working with his guys and with his coaches. And if July rolls around and he's not doing it, I damn sure guarantee you he's going to miss that. He might not miss the work. He might not.
Yeah, he doesn't miss the
punishment.
practice. Yeah, and he joked. I don't know if you saw. I mean, it was a pretty funny clip that the Eagles' first touchdown of the year on his podcast. You know, he was so gassed because he joked he didn't have a training camp. You know, he was so tired. And Jalen Hurts was on the show, and it was him and AJ were looking at each other like, "What's going on with this guy?" He was so tired. But he has said, look, if Doug was still here and they were running things like the way Doug, and remember, this isn't Andy Reid two-a-days. This is just a couple years ago. He said he'd already be retired. No question about it. So the way the Eagles do things has helped him out. So he definitely doesn't want to practice like he used to practice. But there's no reason to think the Eagles aren't going to manage him the same way they did this year. And look, he had arguably his best season. You know, he would argue he didn't. And I know he's told me that personally. So there are little things that he can't do that he used to be able to do. And he said people don't realize that. So he knows time is coming to an end, but if he can play like he played last year, I don't even know why it's a question. I mean, you got to keep riding it out until he can't play like that.
Like I said, most of the time, the league determines. Your team determines, but then the rest of the league determines whether you can play. And nobody in the league saying to Jason, "Yeah, you're not good enough to play anymore." So he is in control of absolutely everything. And the guy, you may think that Howie Roseman already knows. You've got a better feel for that than I do. I think Howie's waiting just like everybody else. I don't know that Jason is tipped
possible
to anyone. None of us know for sure. But this I do feel pretty sure about. Jason's going to say something before Sunday, because I really don't think he's going to call Howie and go, "Howie, I need 2 more days. Give me another 24 hours." I don't think he's going to do that. If he hasn't told Howie, this is under the assumption he hasn't told him yet, which you don't necessarily agree with. I don't think he's going to push the envelope and go, "Listen, these next couple, my wife and I are going away. Got a christening party I got to go to." I don't think he's going past Sunday. Now, will we find out? Maybe Jason dictates the timing of the announcement and how it's going to come out. And I surely believe the Eagles would grant them that. Howie Roseman isn't going to drop dime and call John McMullen and go, "Oh, by the way, Kelce told me he's back." No, that's not going to leak out to Howie. He will do whatever it takes to keep Jason happy. If he wants to say yes and or no and says, "But give me a little bit more time because I want to play this the way I want to play this," I think the Eagles will give him that accord. But I do think that he will make a decision before free agency kicks in on Monday. Agree or disagree?
No, I agree. I've said that, and I know the finish line is getting here, so it's got to be pretty quick. But yeah, I mean that's always been the way he's done it in the past, so I don't think it's going to change this year. I think the only thing that's changed is he started this process last year thinking that was it. You know, this was it. One more year and I'm done. And now he had so much fun and so much success that, you know, that's the part he's wavering on. And that's difficult, you know. We saw what happened with Tom Brady. He got divorced over that. You know, that there's real world issues. These guys aren't robots. You know, I'm sure his wife is very involved in this decision. A lot of things go into it. And, you know, it's not turning on a video game. And I think too many fans think that.
All right, J Mac, I've got an NFL rules / I guess you would call it paperwork type decision. I should know the answer to this, but I don't. I think I know, but I'm not sure. That's why I'm asking you. Compensatory draft picks. Can they be dealt?
Yes, they can now. That was a change. For
Change in
many
the
years,
rule?
they
Okay.
couldn't be changed.
Right.
Couldn't
That's
be
what I
traded.
thought.
Yeah, they changed it a couple years ago. I got to look up the exact year, but yes, now you can trade compensatory picks.
Okay. Yeah. I wasn't sure about it. I knew at one point you couldn't trade them, but I didn't know if they had changed it. Thank you for telling me that is the case. You see the quote from Les Snead, the general manager of the LA Rams, who famously last year when they went to the Super Bowl said, F the picks.
Yeah.
Because they
Oh,
went
yeah.
so far all in to try and win a championship, and they won. More power to them. But there could have been a price to pay. Oh, and it was this season, paid a terrible price and were a mediocre to bad football team. And they don't have that first round draft pick that they would benefit from having such a lousy year this past year. No, they had to trade that to win the Super Bowl the year before. He said, we're going to have to hit the brakes on trading picks for veteran players, on roster construction. We're going to have
no
to
more
hit
F them
those
picks.
breaks.
Yeah.
He's
No more.
paying the price for F them picks. But here's the good news for you Ram fans out there, all three of you that are watching us right now. The Rams did get 4 compensatory draft picks for this year's draft. The NFL yesterday announced their compensatory draft picks for the 2022 draft. Everybody is talking.
See how many San Francisco got? Woo! They got a whole nother draft. They got 7 picks.
Understood. And 3 of them post third round, which is the highest compensatory pick you can get, is at the end of the third round. San Francisco, they got 3 of them. So that tells you how good a team they were this year. They lose their quarterback, their starting quarterback. Then they lose their backup quarterback. And they lost so many free agents this past offseason without replacing them and signing other teams' free agents. They got 7 compensatory picks.
Well, remember, you can only get 4 for players. So they got 3 for all their front office hires. So many people hired the diversity compensatory picks. So the D'Amico Ryans, the Rand Carthons, Robert Salas, all those piled in this year because of the timing. So 3 of those picks were for the hirings away from their organization. Right. And that's why I bring that up for Eagles fans thinking, because the Eagles might be in a position to get 6 or 7 just from a player standpoint, but that cuts off at 4. You can only get 4. So that's why the 49ers compensatory haul, needless to say, is an NFL record.
Yeah, never before has a team had 7 compensatory picks. And they are, sorry, Eagle fans, one of the legit contenders in the NFC next year. There aren't all that many. It's the Eagles and everybody else. And at the top of the everybody else list, it's San Francisco. And then there's another drop-off thereafter, as far as I'm concerned. So the Rams are going to get the benefit of this offseason with 7 compensatory picks. Most people believe the Eagles are going to get a minimum of 4 next year, which is the maximum they can get. But if they lose a lot of free agents, and they've certainly got the possibility to, we ran down the Jimmy Kemsky speculation from his column earlier this week in Philly Voice, and a whole bunch of guys he thinks are eligible for compensatory picks if they sign free agent contracts anyway. Yeah, Eagles got to wait a whole year and change for that to kick in. First thing first, we got to find out if they lose those free agents. Hopefully not all of them. But if they do, and how good a player and how big a contract they're going to get will dictate the round of the pick that they would get for the compensatory guy. One other thing I want to add to the conversation, because I've seen this written a couple different places over the last 24, 48 hours, and people may disagree with me with this. John McMullen may disagree with me with this. I've seen people speculate on the Eagles' potential signings of free agents this offseason. They lose Hargrave and CJ and Bradbury, and somebody's got to step in and play, and they'll draft guys. And Do you think Josh Jobe can start at corner for the Eagles this upcoming year, Johnny Mac?
I do not. I
No,
do
nor,
not.
nor do I.
I think Zach McPherson is still ahead of Josh Jobe on the depth
All
chart.
right. Do you think Zach's don't call me Zach McPherson or Zach don't call me Zach McPherson is good enough to start for the Eagles this upcoming year?
I would not be comfortable with that.
Okay. So there's a very good chance the Eagles will take a cornerback with their first round draft pick, and that's a better possibility of happening. But what happens if someone offers them an unbelievable amount to give up that 10th pick because there's a quarterback still there and Howie they're giving him, he can drop down 5 slots and he gets a future one and fills in the blanks on his draft this year. It's just a Monty Hall, unbelievable deal. It's dropped in his lap, but then the cornerbacks all come off the board and the Eagles don't have a player on their board that they think is strong enough to take in that first round. And all of a sudden, you got Darius Slay and to be determined on the other side of the aisle next year for the Eagle cornerback position. And I've seen a couple people write, the Eagles will stay away from signing free agents this offseason because they don't want to lose out on the compensatory
That's
picks
true.
that they will get.
That is true.
I think that's dumb. I think that's stupid.
Howie believes in that.
Well, then I disagree with Howie Roseman. Like I said, people are going to disagree with me. If you got 2 players that are equal, same type player, very close, money same, talent level same, production level player, and one's a guy who was released by another organization and doesn't come under the compensation judgment, and the other one is a guy who got to free agency. If you sign him, it would be considered a comparison to a guy you lost. Oh, of course, you're going to sign the guy who you don't lose a compensatory pick for. But would you actually sign a lesser player, a less talented player, just because you wouldn't have a compensatory drop-off? You'd sign a less talented player than a better player because, you might lose that 6th round compensatory pick that you're going to get from Miles Sanders.
I don't know if it, and obviously the later you go, we're talking about players like Javon Hargrave, like CJ Gardner-Johnson. The potential 3rd round picks are a big deal. A potential 7th round pick, yeah, what you're saying, who cares? But we're talking the big guys. So, and if you're not in a position to get back your own players, you're probably not going to be in a position to bring in a similar player from outside the organization. I hear what you're saying about 6th, 7th rounders, not as important. But where Howie's very savvy is, look, guys who get cut elsewhere. James Bradbury last year, not susceptible to the compensatory formula in a season. That happens all the time. The later you go, whatever the cutoff is, June 1st or whatever the cutoff is, all of a sudden you're not eligible for a compensatory pick. So when everybody loses their mind, and they will lose their mind, and I try to calm everybody down, and Howie said this last year, everybody was losing their mind in the first 2 days. Oh, the Eagles aren't doing anything. How can they do that? And just settle down.
Johnny Mac, we're only 6 days away from that when people lose their mind.
Exactly.
Because the Eagles didn't do anything immediately out of the gates.
And they're going to do it again this year because they're going to lose certain players. And that's why Howie's on record saying we're going to lose certain players, but they're going to gain some players. And they're very savvy, whether you want to go back to the Chris Longs in 2017 and the LeGarrette Blunts, of waiting to that demarcation line and still getting good players. Patrick Peterson, you're talking about cornerbacks. There's an older guy. If there was one guy who played well on that crappy Minnesota defense last year, it was Patrick Peterson. In that system, the Fangio-like scheme, at his age, just very smart, very savvy. Isn't what he was as a potential Hall of Fame player, from a talent perspective, from a trait standpoint, lost a step, but he's playing in this defense, very similar to James Bradbury. Maybe they get him later in the process. I'm just throwing that name out there. Howie has earned the benefit of that. He should have earned the benefit. He knows what he's doing. And when you're talking about the Eagles won't sign, he's talking about, and I'm talking about potential third round picks, the big name players. Yeah, when you start getting, and he did it with Andrew Sandeo back in the years. Remember, they cut him. He was playing well. The coaching staff was really enamored of Andrew Sandeo. I know the fans weren't, but they really liked Andrew because he's a very smart player. Did everything they wanted, blah, blah, blah. There was that cutoff point, the 9th or 10th game. If you kept him on the roster, you weren't going to get a compensatory pick. And he said, you know what? I'd rather have the pick, and they cut him. And they ended up getting Marcus Epps, and it worked out long term. The guy's very savvy. He's very savvy, and he's going to judge the particular price. He's not going to take a lesser player. The point is, he's not in a position. If he can't get Javon back, he's not bringing in somebody else at the same money.
Right. No, there isn't someone like that even available. Yeah. There isn't.
Well, there's the kid from Denver who might be Draymond Jones, but that's about it. So that's the players he's kind of that people are talking about. They're going to lose some players, and they're not going to sign lesser players to big money, or what they would feel would be lesser players in this organization, and lose out in compensatory picks.
And this is the only point I'm trying to make, just to stay within the parameters you're taking the discussion, which are right and just. If you believe that Javon Hargrave is close to if we're talking average annual value, close to a $20 million deal per year guy.
That's what Schefter said.
That's what Schefter says. Fine. Yeah. So we'll use Schefter's numbers. Let's say this Denver kid, who you're suggesting is close, is potentially in that same neighborhood. So 17 million, he's not quite as high as Hargrave. It's what Spotrac or Adam Schefter or anyone else would speculate his average annual value is. Let's say he wants to play for the Eagles, and he's willing to come and play for the Eagles for 12, which is below what most people assume his market value would be. If Howie Roseman says, well, no, I'm going to pass on him because he's going to be considered a match with Javon Hargrave, and I'll lose out on a third-round compensatory pick, then that's not all in, Howie. Then that's not, we want to go back to the Super Bowl next year, Howie. That's we're trying to balance between 2023 and the future as well. No, I don't want Howie to lose his edge of being all in. Now, it's a very specific, I'm threading a needle here to make a point, but I read it once, I read it 3 times in the past 24 hours. The Eagles won't be signing free agents that they would lose compensatory. The Eagles are banking on those compensatory draft picks next year. Next year, the Eagles are going to have all of compensatory draft picks. Right now, I don't care a whole hell of a lot about 2024 compensatory draft picks. I'm more worried about the 2023 Eagles and going back to the Super Bowl. And if you got to bend a little bit to be able to get the best player to replace someone that you're potentially losing who helped you make the Super Bowl this year, then you got to be open-minded. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Well, Jody, I hear you, and that's where the savvy part of it comes in. But to use that example, I mean, Draymond Jones is 25 years old. We talk about it all the time with Jalen Hurts. He's not taking $4 million less to come here, so that kind of stuff takes care of itself. Yeah, that's where the savvy part comes into it. If Howie's got a player who's going to get 16 million somewhere else, and he says, "I want to play for the Eagles." He might be from Philadelphia. He might be Hassan Reddick, whatever. Yeah, he'll do it. He's not a dumb guy. That's where the savvy part is. But that kind of stuff's not going to happen with a 25-year-old. We talk about it all the time with Eagles fans talking Jalen Hurts. No, he's not taking a cost-effective deal. This is his first opportunity to make money, and he's going to go out, rightfully so, and make money. So that kind of stuff takes care of itself.
Let me question Howie Roseman's savviness. And you and I are both Howie Roseman fans. We're well on record, Howie Roseman Appreciation Society here on Birds 365. We both think he's well-deserved Executive of the Year, and we congratulate him.
I haven't got my apologies for that one, by the way, Jody.
Well,
I used to get killed for my.
don't hold your breath on
Yeah.
that. Neither one of us are going to get that. Chuck Clark got traded yesterday. Chuck Clark was a guy whose name we bandied about here before C.J. Gardner-Johnson came to town, starting safety for the Ravens. They went out and signed Marcus Williams, who, as John likes to remind us, the Eagles are very interested in. And if the Ravens hadn't gone over the top, they probably would have gotten him. They didn't, but that's okay. They draft Kyle Hamilton, who had a really good first year as a rookie. So they ended up trading Chuck Clark yesterday, which again, coming up to the team year, the league year is probably a motivating factor. And he got traded to the Jets, and all he had to give up was a 7th-round pick. Now, I was surprised because I thought that when we talked about with Chuck Clark last year, and again, he's a year older now in the last year of his contract, different situation, making a trade a year later. But he did not play badly for the Raiders last year. He was just Ravens last year. He's just their 3rd best safety. They've got 2 guys that are better than him, but doesn't mean he's like the 65th best safety in the NFL. I guarantee you he's higher than that. He just is on a team that has 2 safeties that are better. If you think there's a chance to lose Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, if you're Howie Roseman with 2 7th-round picks, would the Eagles have been well advised to trade for Chuck Clark yesterday?
Yeah, I remember talking about this. I just don't think he's a fit for what they do defensively. He's more of a movement, I don't want to call him a box safety, but, he plays all over the place. He's more of the big, more of the Malcolm Jenkins type, not that good, but more of that type of safety. And that's not what the Eagles were looking for. And that ended up, when we talked about it last year, that's what I said. And that ended up being correct. Marcus Epps, coverage safety. Chauncey, cornerback, coverage safety. That's the defense they played. Now, are they going to change that defense? I don't think they are. I don't think they're going to change the philosophy. So they're still going to be on the market for coverage safeties. That's going to be more important to them. Clark, as he played 5, he played a lot of snaps. By the way, you asked me to look up what he was. He was 46th of 88. So, basically in a hat and,
middle of the road,
middling safety.
Yeah.
And he was who number 1 was? Kyle Hamilton.
Yeah.
Number 1 in the entire
That's
NFL.
one that JM definitely agreed on. We both loved him coming into the draft.
Yeah. But, when you look at his numbers, so he played well over 1,000 snaps. Played 531 at safety, 331 in the box, 180 as a slot, 77 lined up on the defensive line, 30 as a wide cornerback. I mean, this guy played all over the field in a Malcolm Jenkins. That's not what the Eagles do. That's not what they do. That's not the type of player they're looking at. And that's why I said people overlook fit. We're going to talk to Ian Cummings here in a couple minutes. And that's what, running back, fit. Why do you need an eye back in the Philadelphia offense? You don't. That's not what they do. They're an RPO zone read offense. Fit is a big thing, and Chuck Clark is a different kind of safety. If Jim Schwartz was still here, I'd say, yeah, that makes some sense. But that's not what they do defensively. And it's, I don't think they're going away from that in the shift from Jonathan Gannon to Sean Desai.
Right. But here's my read on the player. You're right in that in the Ravens defense, he was asked to do other things. And his flexibility made him capable of doing those things. And that's why he played as much as he did. But I think he's just a good enough player that he could fit into the Eagles scheme. That if the Eagles took him on, it wouldn't be, oh my God, his only virtue is flexibility and that he can do a lot of different things. No, I think he could do what the Eagles need him to do in the Eagles scheme. I think he's that talented a player. And if they're starting Reed Blankenship and I think they'll probably draft another safety this year. I don't even know.
I think they're going to get Marcus back. I think there's a good chance they get Marcus. But I think they're going to lose CJ and get Marcus back. And that's what they want. And right or wrong, that's what they want. They want coverage safeties. It's like Harrison Smith's probably going to get cut over the weekend. That's a guy who's going to the Hall of Fame, a big name guy. He's not a fit. 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 Not a bit. Wasn't a bit in that defense out there. Not a bit in this defense here. I don't think Chuck Clark's a fit for this defense. Now,
Yeah, I
you
think
want
he
to
could be
say
a fit.
change the defense? I'm not
No, 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 no,
necessarily
no, no,
against
no, no,
that.
no, 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 no. Here's where you and I separate. I think he can play an Eagle defense. What of his game tells you he couldn't play an Eagle defense?
He's a bit the strength of his game is not coverage. The strength of his game, he's a big safety. He's a physical guy, physical in the modern NFL. He's
So
near. I mentioned,
is Reed Blankenship's strength coverage?
yeah, Reed's a post safety. That's what people don't know for whatever reason. That's what he played at Middle Tennessee. That's what he played last year with the Eagles. And I think they're probably a little bit too comfortable with Reed. I'll agree with that, but no, he's not a box safety. He's not a box safety. I think people do that. Probably because of the color of his skin, to be honest. And they think he's not a post safety, but he is. He plays center field more than that, more than anything. And that's what they want. And I'm not saying they're going to hand the job to Reed Blankenship because they have to be realistic. But I mentioned, bottom 20 in coverage, not his strength. So when I talk about the PFF rankings, about half, mid-range safety, he's bottom third in coverage. That's the weakness to his game, and that's not what the Eagles want.
I need to see Reed Blankenship have a full year as a star. He dropped in, played a couple of games.
Well, I'm not saying
I need to see with my own two eyes that he's a.
I
good
would not be
safety.
comfortable saying Reed Blankenship is my starting safety. I think you got to bring in competition.
Where did Reed Blankenship play college again?
Middle Tennessee State.
Middle Tennessee State. I'm not going to judge Reed Blankenship's coverage ability in the NFL because of what he did at Middle Tennessee State.
Hey, you know who else played it?
I need to see some of that with my own eyes in the NFL before I make that determination.
You know who else played at Middle Tennessee State?
It's been a bit of a safety university. I'll give you that.
Kevin Byard.
Byard is a damn good player, but again, I'm reserving judgment on the coverage abilities of Reed Blankenship off the small look that we got last year. That's all I'm going to say. All right, we're working on getting in contact with Ian Cummings. Apparently, he hasn't gotten the link to be able to join us, so we're doing work behind the scenes to make sure he does get the link. We're going to talk some draft with Ian Cummings from Pro Football Network, hopefully next here on Birds 365.